This is an account of the cartoon crisis in Denmark, 2005, September 30. I was one of the main persons who followed the crisis from day one and was part of the work group who took up the case and worked to get an apology from the newspaper. Um, I would like to tell about the account and what happened so we can see what we can learn from it for the future. History is sometimes like a big bowl of incidents and stories that future generations all can learn from. And it's also about perspectives and where we stand. I detailed the whole story in my book, My Farewell to Islamism, and in seven chapters, and it was all documented by a Danish journalist who made sure that the events mentioned there were correctly according to facts, and had also some contacts with main persons who had any mention or relation in the story, and were thereby confirmed as well as a factual story. Basically, we can say that the cartoon crisis is about two views of the world and two positions that took it to the end. It got polarized very quickly and very hard. The first position was mentioned by President Tayyip Erdogan when he came to Denmark 15th of November 2005 and met with the Prime Minister there, and he said in the press conference that freedom of speech is very important indeed, but the holy is sacred. And the opposite position is mentioned by the newspaper editors and the liberal wing in the Danish political society, that the holy is important, but freedom of speech is holy. So I guess that the crisis can be summarized in this equation in some parts of it. And then through the crisis, there have been a lot of details and a lot of misunderstandings and things that actually got out of hand for both parties. And that's what I would like to talk about in this very short version of the story. Actually, I made a detailed version of it in the books, and recently made an Arabic version where I detailed every step of the story. It was on September 30th. It was a Friday. I had just been in a small town called Vejle in Denmark, and held the Friday sermon there when another scholar called me from Aarhus, a Lebanese scholar who had been studying in the 90s in Saudi Arabia's universities for Islamic teachings. And he was upset in the phone and told me to meet. And then I went to the house of my first and former teacher, Mr. Abdul Nasser Qasimi, a man whom came from Syria in the 80s and later got asylum in Denmark. And he was from a classical Islamic teaching background, had studied in Medina as well, but in the 80s, where the ideas were somehow different there. So he was more influenced by another wing of the Islamic thoughts than Hlayhel, the former mentioned scholar who came later to Denmark. We met all three, and he showed me the newspapers, and they were, in fact, somehow stunning. So in the front, on the front page, we had the title. This is Muhammad's Many Faces, and then we had a picture of this guy here with the sabers, and two women behind him. And it was a very stunning, ugly picture in the eyes of Muslims who look up to the Prophet and see him as a perfect example of godly guidance and a person who should be followed and loved. So it's it's a totally different picture. Then there was the man with the bomb, saying that Islam is related to extremism, and this is all the doing of Muhammad. And then there's here the Prophet with some nuts and stuff in his brains, and he keeps the woman held down in his ways. And it was very hard to read about this. And then later we saw that other of the pictures weren't as hard or bad. They were slightly satirical or strange, like this drawer who's trying to hide himself because he's afraid of the repercussions of his drawings, or this fighter up here who says to the other fighters that wait a minute, it's just some Danish guy from the countryside. No need to react very much. And here we have an imam, or maybe it's meant to be the prophet himself, saying, stop, we don't have any more virgins in heaven. So the story behind all this is that, as told by Fleming Rose in the article following the publication of the newspaper article, is that he's saying that we got to know that there are a situation where a writer cannot find anyone to draw drawings for him about Muhammad or on Muhammad in a satirical way he wanted in his book. This guy is called Cora Blütken. He was a leftist and had formerly been doing satirical work also on Muslims and other stuff, and he wanted to continue this work but couldn't find anyone, and he felt afraid. And the years before there had been some hittings on people who have been trying to use the Islamic symbols in any negative way in cultural events or theater or maybe films or writings. And the newspaper saw it as its duty to discuss that, and they discussed it on the 19th of September, and came through with this idea that they should call out for people, drawers who like to draw this the cartoons, and only 12 reacted to this and sent in these drawings, and then they published them in the newspaper. And they were saying in the article, or Fleming Rose was saying in the article following the publication, that if people want to live like in democratic secular societies, they have to accept to be ridiculized and being hit with satire and negative expressions like this, because it's the freedom of expression that's the most important, and not the religious feelings or the other values that people carry with them. And he told later in his own story and publication that he didn't want a society where people could be afraid of anything. Everything should be out of limit for publication. And when we saw these drawings that evening, and we felt like somebody spit us in the face, and my fellow colleagues had said that they've met people in the mosques who were very angry, upset, and wanted scholars to do something about it. And then we contacted a very known scholar in Copenhagen called Ahmed Abu Laban. He's this guy from the right here, and he was not so keen on making any actions. Actually, he wanted the stuff to be relaxed, and he said, we are upset about this, we don't like it, but let's remember what happened with the Salman Rushdie case. Let's remember what happened last year with that Van Gogh situation where a young Muslim killed him on the street, and we don't want these reactions for our mission work. We want to build the picture of Islam, and these type of reactions may be a way the newspaper want to just draw us out into some kind of confrontation and thereby make themselves important. And the other scholar, Hlayhel, I told about before, wasn't agreeing with Abu Laban on that on the phone. So we agreed to meet live in Copenhagen a few days later, where we called in several others, Islamic institutions and organizations and small mosques. And they came to that meeting, and from there they agreed on 11-point program to carry out a campaign, that we should not ignore these drawings, that we should try to write articles, we should try to reach out to the newspaper and the editor in it, and try to reach out to the Minister of Culture. And that's because the publications were in the cultural section of the newspaper. So some kind of awareness was there in the group that we should call the Minister of Culture and not like the Foreign Minister. And there should be demonstrations on the street, and maybe one day with a work boycott for all Muslims to show that they don't like having their symbol expressed this negatively in the newspaper in the eyes of the non-Muslim Danes, and how would that associate them with the picture of a very, very negative view. Of course, the newspaper saw it very differently, and as I'm going to tell about later when we meet Carsten Juste, the chief editor. But at that point, we were in the 11-point program also concerned that the ambassadors of the Muslim world should take their role actively, and that we should contact Muslims and scholars around the world to let them know about this situation that just happened in Denmark, and have them to interact with it in one way or another. And that there should be a working group. The working group were chosen of 3 persons: Raed Hulaihil, the former mentioned Imam, scholar, and 2 colleagues, one from Abu Laban's mosque in Copenhagen, Qasim Said, and the third one from the 3rd biggest town in Denmark, in Odense, Abu Malik, an Algerian who's very active in the Islamic community at that time. And Abu Laban should be like a consultant to the group, and they chose me to be the guy who like followed up on the newspapers and articles and translated stuff for them, like a secretary for the group in a way or another. That's why I was following the story from the beginning, from the first evening, and was basically part of the action that we took that evening. And from 2nd of October, when that meeting ended, in 10 days, some of these points were executed. Letters were sent out to the newspaper and the Minister of Culture, to the different Islamic mosques to join the group, and actually more and more joined. We came up until 27 organizations and groups in Denmark. Then 16,000 signatures were gathered from Muslims, where they should sign that they agree with the working group representing them, and that this is something that hurt their feeling, and they don't like the depiction of the Prophet Muhammad in that solemnly negative way in the newspaper. And we also contacted the ambassadors, and they took actually action in the mid of October in a very strong manner, and they sent a letter to the Prime Minister. The letter is mentioned here in the book of Pierre Bick Thompson. He was the chief editor-in-chief for Reuters, and he wrote this book based on 8 interviews with the Prime Minister, the cultural editor of the newspaper, with the Foreign Minister, and the guy speaking to you now with me, and with the Ambassador Mona Omar from Egypt, Carsten Juste, the chief editor of the newspaper, Abu Laban, the active missionary and imam in Copenhagen, and Nasser Khidr, the moderate politician who is opposing the Islamic view since his youth. And he actually mentioned the letter of the ambassadors here, and he showed how it's written and formalized. The ambassador of Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Republic of Iran, Pakistan, Egypt, Indonesia, Algeria, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Libya, and charge d'affaires à la Morocco, and the head of Palestinian General Delegation in Denmark. And these wrote a letter to the Prime Minister, asking him to take some action towards what's going on, and that there has been a negative depiction of Muslims sometime in Denmark, that the tone is not very acceptable, and Islam as a religion is being, with these caricatures, goes against the spirit of Danish value and tolerance. And they earned him to do something to contain the situation, and that they wanted a meeting with him, basically. The Prime Minister later explained why he rejected them, and he did reject them. He said that it's not his business to stop the newspapers or do something about publications in a free country. And so when the Prime Minister rejected them, they were upset about it, and thought that it was a very strange move. In Prime Minister's opinion, he said that ambassadors usually address the Foreign Minister office and not the Prime Minister. They send a copy to the Foreign Minister office, but they said that it was a draft and not the right one, and they didn't understand the occasion for that meeting. So, and the foreign minister was on travel in Nigeria when that letter was sent, so he didn't really know a lot about it. And the prime minister reacted negatively to the ambassadors, which made 22 former diplomats and politicians in Denmark write a letter in one of the biggest newspapers in Denmark saying that the prime minister is wrong to reject ambassadors of that kind in such a situation with that story, and that he should have taken the meeting, even though they agree with him on his position that it's not his work to interfere in the independent newspapers or the cultural publications in Denmark. There is no censor of that kind in the Danish society anymore, and that's what he should have explained to them in a meeting, but also showing understanding for their feelings and the cultural differences that has arisen from that. So not meeting the ambassadors has been seen later as one of the biggest diplomatic mistakes, and also engraving lacks that made the situation escalate later on. But also in October, the Muslim community delegation, we got an suggestion from a young Muslim active lady called Asma Abdul Hamid, who wanted to raise the story against the newspaper in the court of law, and using the paragraph of racism that the newspaper has went over the boundaries according to the boundaries of racism in any publications or speeches against any persons or minorities, thereby stigmatizing them. And the working group of the Muslim communities, which I was attached, whereto I was attached, wasn't on agreement on that. Some wanted to go along with the order, and a few said that maybe it will backfire because the legal system won't be fair and won't look at it from the perspective of the Muslim feelings and how they see the Prophet. They are like in one league in one way or another, and they would just put this case to rest, and thereby we will lose an asset in the case. But most of the members of the group wanted to go along, and so a file was given to a lawyer firm in Copenhagen, taken by Asma Abdul Hamid, Qasim Said, and I followed them as well. We walked on the pavements in the center of Copenhagen, going up to that advocate firma, giving the case a legal dimension as well. And then the social dimension was that the Muslims should go on the street in demonstrations. And here, one of the very known imams in Denmark, Muhammad Fuad Barazi, was a scholar from Syria. He went alone on a demonstration with the Shiite mosque and the Islamic Cultural Center without coordinating with the rest of the group, which started to make some disagreements and troublesome feelings between the two groups. It's like he wanted to lead things and not be part of things as they saw it in the group, and he saw that he was just making a demonstration according to what the group wanted people to do. So it was two opinions that started to crack on the surface. Another crack that started showing on the surface was also that we couldn't get the Turkish and Pakistani communities to go along with all the work. They have been in the country for many more years than the relatively newly Arab communities, and some of the scholars who've just been in Denmark for a few years. So there is some cultural understanding they had, and they didn't want to go too deep into this case, but they wanted, of course, to support and help. So that's why we had trouble and hard time getting the representative of the Turkish Islamic community, Zeki Kosher and Ahmed Deniz, whom I was in contact with due to my relation to the what's called the moderate Islamic movement, or in other words, the non-violent Muslim Brotherhood in the West at that time. And that's because the Muslim Brotherhood didn't want to interact. Jihad al-Farra, a doctor, a PhD medicine from Syria as well, and a friend to my teacher Nasser Qasimi, whom I've met on many occasions, rejected wanting to do any. So they rejected wanting to do anything about this case, wanted to keep the focus on the Islamic mission and not the reactions to such a case or such a story that's very negative and like a spit in the face of the Muslim community. They wanted to learn from the story. and that's why we couldn't like get everyone along, but everyone like showed their support generally to the case from the Islamic community in the Muslim Brotherhood arena. So at that time in mid-October, several Muslims wrote letters to the newspapers to show their contempt for these stories, and they got some reaction in the mail, because every time you publish any opinion in the newspapers in Denmark, I guess that's the case in other countries in the West as well, you have to publish it. If it's your own opinion, you have to publish it with your address and your full name and a post code. And so they got reactionary letters sent by anonymous sources, and these letters were gathered in the mosque, especially in Odense. At Abu Malik came to us with them, and some got them in Aarhus and some got them in Copenhagen. It's like the same letters. It's as if it's the same guys or people just following up anonymous letters. They opened them and they could see three very ugly pictures. Some pig nose man that should show a religious guy with a pig nose, and a lady praying with a dog upon her, and the third one is saying that the prophet is like out to get minors and something like that. And that's also like even more enlightening the fires of anger and frustration between these Muslims. And we took the letters and tried also to see what we could do about them if the police could do anything. But since they were anonymous and written on an old type machine, nobody could do anything. But we could see that this was really, there was somebody keeping an eye on what's being published and reacting to it in a manner that's actually putting the fire logs on the small fireballs that started to ignite back in October, in the mid of October. Some incidents happened also in late October that had an effect later. Was that ambassador of Egypt, Muna Omar, called us to a meeting out in her villa in Österbro. So Abu Laban, Qasim Saeed, Hlayhil, and I went there to meet with her in her villa, followed by a man who's like a mediator between the two groups, and called Ahmed Harbi, an Egyptian I didn't know a lot about. And she told us about she had been following the media, and this is not a normal case, and that her view has been like this is too hard to get through with, and why is this newspaper, especially been for several years, focusing on negative stuff on Muslims. And she didn't like that, and she said that she would like to coordinate for further work on this case, and that there should be done something about it. And at that moment, I also felt some kind of double standard from my scholar friends and imams, because since many of them had been like criticizing the Egyptian regime and talking negatively, and Abu Laban especially had been blacklisted from being living there, and some of the other scholars didn't like the way these more so-called non-Islamic politicians are like treating politics in the Muslim countries. And the double standards also sitting with a woman, since they are from a conservative society, and not like having any trouble with that, and drinking tea and talking and all that. There were some things I really somehow started like getting into my mind, that there is something here that's not according to the basic values. It's more, of course, like interests play a role in what to do and when not to do it. Anyhow, we went from there with a positive view that we had some supporters, and another support came to us from OIC, the Organization of Islamic Conference, with Kamal Eddin Oglu, a Turkish leader who actually also put focus on the cartoons, and sent a condemnation letter about it to Denmark, and that this is wrong and shouldn't be done. And then we felt that we were not alone in the area anymore. And then we also got some support from the newspaper called Politiken. It was a newspaper with a different view than the Jyllands-Posten, and that's why in October, November, Tuya Seidenfaden, their very charismatic editor at that time, he died unfortunately early in his 55s, I had the pleasure of meeting him once. He was very keen on letting our point of view get out, and he wanted us to print articles in the newspaper showing our true reaction to this story, and why we have gathered ourselves together, and we have put a program together, and why this is not right and this is wrong in our opinion. And so we started like writing opinion letters, 4 in total, that that was meant to be published in the Politiken, and 2 or 3 of them got really published before the things got out of hand in December, January, and the world like turned on fire against Denmark. But we had edited these double-sided letters to explain the background, the thoughts, the ideas, the Muslim community in generally. So the events of October was like a stalemate, like no reactions from the official canals, so there were a rejection, but support from some of the Muslim formal canals, and the working group were growing to have the Turkish and Pakistanis and Somalis and Bosnians and other groups join along. And we were like looking forward to in a way or another get this excuse from the newspaper, because that's one of the formal claims, that the newspaper should find a way to excuse itself for hurting our feelings and the Muslim feelings, and using the Prophet Muhammad in such a negative way, depicting him as they did. But then in November, on the 4th of November, another newspaper in Denmark, a smaller newspaper, but meant for intellectuals mainly, because they dig deeper in many articles, called Weekend Avisen, and they published 10 drawings that were actually like putting logs on the fire, or supporting the view of the newspaper, which made us aware of the escalation that's waiting ahead, and that these people didn't want to meet on talks. They had a view, they had some values they wanted to defend at any cost. And here we can see the 10 newspapers in, and this one is like you can see it's like a trans guy between a man or a woman, saying that this was Muhammad, or he was Mona Lisa, or this is his foot, or this is how he thinks, or this is his thoughts, and something like that. And all this is, for anyone who knows the Muslim community, especially the religious one, will understand that it's not easy to swallow for people who like, in many ways put Muhammad above everything else, and see him in a very bright and perfect way. No criticism, no negative thoughts about him. And it can be strange to understand that from a non-religious point of view, where you criticize leaders and criticize prophets and see them as maybe some crazies, or people who want to control or manipulate others, and that people should have a critical thinking, analytical thinking about what they are taught, and what this person is doing in his life, and basically take what's good and reject what's not good, or leave him altogether, and something like that. But there is something about religious feelings and religious symbols that keeps repeating the same way of feeling and thinking, and that's a kind of glorifying the leader, or the picture, and seen as a prophet. That means he's beyond such kind of criticism and not acceptable in any way. And so when they published these 10 publications, we saw that this was an escalation in many ways, and so the group also wanted to escalate in another dimension. But we were waiting for the Muslim countries to help along with that. And so in late November, two incidents happened that made the escalation very clear. One is that the Prime Minister said that he would like to meet with some moderate Muslim groups or migrants, but he still didn't meet with the imams and the people behind the action group, or any of them, to have a dialogue. And the politician Nasser Kader, who was against the Islamic movement, was very liberal and democratic, had also his views on this small group of very extremist imams who would like to control everything. And the editor of the newspaper saw in the Islamic ideas a kind of fascism. And he had been in Russia for many years before as a journalist and newspaper editor, and saw how the society were run by one party media, and that everything was under control from the people who are in charge. And that's why he didn't want this to happen again, and he didn't want the escalation to happen in Denmark. And he didn't want at any point to put his head down for the Islamic fear, or that they should be afraid of publishing anything they like, even though it's hard provocation. So for him, it was a test in one way, as they said later in their own biographies and books, and in other way, it was like to confirm the belief in the freedom of speech as like put above everything else, because that's the only thing people have in order to live in a society without fear. And so it happened that the prime minister also agreed on meeting a young Islam critical lady called Ayaan Hirsi. She was not so known at that time, but he wanted to meet her and thank her for her work for freedom of speech, and criticizing her origins and backgrounds, and the tribalism thoughts, and so. And we saw that it was also a kind of exclusion of us again, that he's like meeting with everybody else, but not the people with the 16,000 signatures that were handed over to the prime minister's office mid-October, followed by the DR Danish radio media. Like the TV was there when Qasim Saeed went with his 16,000 signatures that has been gathered from all over Denmark by us in the mosques and in the people's social activity. And then what was handed over to the prime minister media caught on television. He ignored all that, in our opinion. He didn't want to meet with us, and they just wanted to say, we do what we like, we don't care about your feelings, actually. That's how we interpreted these moves. And no answer from the Minister of Culture, Brian Mickelson, who was still young at that time, and had some months earlier in that same year said in some conferences that there is a cultural battle, that's a new front between the Islamic thoughts and the Western thoughts. In a way or another, these words were used not exactly, but in that term, that there is a cultural front, there is a cultural battle, and that they have to stand up to it. So they were very aware that they were leading a cultural battle for liberalism, and for the ideas of the freedom of speech. It became like a holy thing that we shouldn't like put out of our hands. While the religious group saw it as getting out of balance and out of inappropriate actions and ways of dealing with things. And so the escalation was set basically in the end of November, where the ambassador of Egypt once more reached out to Abu Laban in the mosque of Dortevai. I was at that point a teacher in the school of Iqra, a small private school, and was busy with my wife and my only kid at that time, my daughter, my beloved daughter. And I didn't follow the activities for some days, and so I came one evening to the Islamic Center and met that guy Abu Malik from Odense in the yard, and told him, so what are you doing here? Is it another meeting or what? He said, no, we have agreed to send the delegations, and we are just putting the last agreements on who to join. I said, okay, and I was busy and not been following so much, so what's going to happen? And he said, we wanted that Abu Laban should go, but it wasn't possible because this is I'm so Abu Laban couldn't go because he had been blacklisted earlier from Egypt, and the other choice was Muhammad Fuad Barazi, the scholar from Syria I mentioned earlier, but because he did what he did with the demonstration, working alone with the Imam Muhtadi from the Shiite Mosque and the Islamic Cultural Center, and hasn't been going along with the working groups activities, and they were also afraid that he might hijack the whole project, or maybe do some stuff out of script. So they preferred not to put him in charge, even though he was like the best option after Abu Lawan. And then they thought of Hlayhil, but Hlayhil wanted to prepare for another delegation going to Saudi Arabia because Hajj, the pilgrimage, was closed, and there was the Islamic Conference Center going to be in Mecca in 7 and 8 of December. So he was working on that line and wanted to, if the possibility opens, to be on that delegation because he has contacts and people he knows there. So the third best choice was to send Muhammad Khalid Samha, the guy from the Muslim Brotherhood from Syria. He had no problems in Egypt directly. So they put him in charge of the delegation, and with him was Zeki Kosher, one of the well-known leaders of the Miligorish community, as an Islamic Turkish community following Erbakan and Erdogan line in Turkey. And with them was Sarwar Shudri from the Pakistani Islamic community, and with them was Nuruddin Fattah, the Iraqi school teacher who followed them on the trip. And the Egyptian embassy made all possible, and they took the plane on 4th of December. The night of 4th of December, Hlayhil and Qasim Saeed put together what was called the folder of the support of the Prophet. It's kind of a showcase they could take with them, with the drawings and the small explanation text and the situation in Denmark and the rejection of the meetings by the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister and Culture Minister and the isolation that we were living in. And so they put this showcase together in a very big hurry and gave it to the delegation who took it to Egypt. On their trip to Egypt, Mohammed Samha, who wasn't into every details, started showing the case like a bit randomly. And some of the pictures that was in the case, we had in the beginning the 12 cartoons of the Jyllands-Posten, then there was a small separation, then the 10 cartoons of Weekendavisen, which I showed earlier, and then a small separation, and then the drawings that were sent by post to the Muslims, also saying that these are drawings sent to the Muslims by post. But there was not a clear definition mark, like leaving them out of the picture totally. So everyone who would like just look into the showcase and maybe see the woman with the dog on her, or see the praying Muslim woman with the dog, or see the man with the pig face, he would maybe get the idea that this is not a very good situation in Denmark. And that's what the newspaper criticized later, and the news that followed the event said that the delegation manipulated and didn't tell things truly correctly. But later in February, Politiken was again on the lane and asked some professors in communication and experts in these kind of diplomatic communications to look into the folder, and they published it totally from page 1 to page 34, saying and analyzing and concluding that there were no clear intended manipulation in the case. There you could clearly see this is the Jyllands-Posten, this is Weekendavisen, this is this is that, but it could have been more clear which belonged to what in a manner that didn't like maybe give an impression that wasn't so clear. And until today, and I wrote that in my book, I'm not sure whether Raed and Qasim did that on purpose to leave it in a way that could be misunderstood, or it was because of the hurriness they were in. But I didn't like the way it was put together so quickly, but what could we do? We had to support the action and the work they were doing there because of the case. And they were well received. When they came back on the 12th of December, we met them immediately. While they were away, when they came back, we met them immediately. And by meeting them, we heard about the good news. They met with the Mufti, they met with the Foreign Minister, with Amr Musa, the Arabic League leader, and many others, and the newspapers were ready to talk to them, and several imams and people wanted to know about the case, and they promised them the support. And the Egyptian media started actually eventually soon after focusing more and more on the case. And one can wonder why is that, because Egypt is a secular state and still Muslim in its feelings, and maybe they felt like stepped on like everybody else, and maybe they wanted to use the case because they had elections coming, and the Muslim Brotherhood stood to gain more and more seats in the parliament, and they wanted to show that they also could be the supporters of the religion and Islam and its values and symbols. So there are different explanations for why Egypt wanted to put this case on a more hot track. But nonetheless, it was to the effect of the group, so we could be heard. That's what we wanted. We wanted to be heard. We wanted the pressure to help us to get heard inside Denmark. And once again, want to say that there were already publications about this in a Saudi newspaper in October, back in October, and in Pakistan there were demonstrations, and there were a mention about a reward for somebody who could kill the people there, and there were also some threats from other directions, and there were also media coverage in Egypt as well back in October to this case. So it wasn't new, and you can't say that it was the delegation that solemnly brought this case outside of Denmark. That was the claims that came later and wanted to burn the witch on the stake in Denmark, saying that it's me and the group that did all this together. And this is factual, that the case were already rolling and there were no communication inside Denmark, as Mona Omar put it in one of her expressions that's been brought here in Reuters' book. She said that for 3 months the Muslims and their representatives in Denmark were trying to get through, and it was like hell getting through to anyone to talk to, and so the escalation was like a natural next step for such a grave case. And so when they got back, we saw that it was good, it was empowering, but we had some bad luck with the Saudi embassy, because while they were away, Raed and I went to the Saudi embassy to talk to them about sending a delegation to Saudi Arabia, but they said we don't want to do anything more about this. That was the instructions they got from back home. And so we didn't know what to do, but empowered by the group who went to Egypt, we started looking into sending a delegation to Lebanon and to Syria and Jordan, because these countries can also help working on some stuff. And there were also some mentioning of sending delegation to Morocco and maybe Egypt, Sudan. Sudan was dropped, but in Morocco there was a kind of interest of sending some people there. And that didn't happen either. But the delegation that went to Syria and Lebanon came in like a week or 10 days after. The folder, the showcase, were now a little more put together in a more presentable way, but still the same showcase basically. And when they went on to plan the delegation, I remember I was on my way home and had been working a lot those days and had my wife and kid. And so on the bus, my phone rang and the bus was filled with people. And I remember clearly Qasim Said saying, listen, we are preparing this delegation and we want you to go along as the representative of the youth in Denmark. We need a young face, and we've chosen you. And I said to him, I can't. I have my wife and kid here and they don't live in Denmark. So this is only a short time I can be with them. So Qasim, he insisted that I should go and that they wanted me in the group to go. And I said that I can't, because my wife never got a resident permit in Denmark. They rejected her back in 2004, and my kid and her were always living in our original home country, and we had to find solutions. So they come to visit me from time to time, and I had them there in that period and didn't want to leave them in the holiday and Christmas time. Then he saw that there was no way getting through to me in the bus, and then later on my way home, walking from the bus, Raed called me Hlayhel, the leader of the working group, and he said to me, listen, in a Lebanese accent, because he knew I would understand that much more than the classic Arabic. Said, listen, this is a duty we are on, and I don't want anyone random to go and represent this case. You know it from the beginning, and you've been with us all the time, and you speak fluently English and Danish and Arabic, and you are a very good face for as a young man from Denmark coming along, and besides, you're Lebanese. And then, in a way or another, I had to accept, and I knew it was my duty, and I liked to have that duty helping in clearing up the the situation about the Prophet's case. So I talked to my wife and told her to stay with my parents. And today I regret very much I left them, but that was how it was in the name of the case. So we went to Lebanon, and there started a lot of meetings with different fractions and groups. We even went to the Patriarch Sphere, the head of the Christian Maronite community, with a very powerful voice in the Middle East and connections into the Vatican. He was very polite, and I liked the meeting. And he actually was like very different from the type we have met in Denmark so far as neglecting the religious feelings. He said that he didn't like this at all, and that he know that this very hardcore way of treating the religions and their symbols is not healthy. And he said that he thanks us for informing him about this case, but didn't promise any help or any work or anything else. But we were happy and content that he at least had this open-minded way of looking at things. One of the more easy meetings was Scholar Hlayhel's friends, the Salafist group in Lebanon, and they were like getting along all from the beginning, and said we will talk about this in the mosque. And the case with them is they are very popular and very much when they preach and talk, they reach out to many thousand people, and they were a growing movement in Lebanon, as opposite to the Shiite movement. The Saudi Salafist movement was like growing and getting help and attention in Lebanon at that time. And so we were happy we got their help as well. And then a more difficult meeting was in the Shiite headquarters in Lebanon, where we met Amal religious leader Abdul Amir Kabalan. He's the second in chief after Musa al-Sadr, who disappeared in the Libyan desert in one day in the 80s and never was seen or heard from again. And speculations have been wild where he went and what happened to him, Musa al-Sadr. So this guy, Muhammad Amir Kabalan, was his second in chief. And we waited for him in a room without no windows and only carpets and some big chairs. And then he came in, and one of his first comment was, in a way funny but strange, to Scholar Hlayhel, who had a big, long, dark beard like the traditional Salafist, and had his Salafi clothes on with a white dress, but he had also his Lebanese scholar hat on to show that he belongs to this Lebanese Sunni scholar movement. And he told him, why do you keep your beard so long living in the West? And the funny thing about that, we were stunned and we didn't say anything. And I could see Scholar Hlayhel was like reacting. What's this? He had to put himself together to form an answer. But Kabalan had a beard that was at least as long as his. So it was very strange commenting on his beard from the beginning when he said, "Welcome, sit down. Why is your beard so long living in the West?" And Hlayhel told him that, that we come to you with a case. And then he explained, and then he changed somehow and wanted to talk more about it, and said that they will look into the case as well. And the more good meetings followed with the Mufti of Lebanon, Qabbani, and then we had to put a meeting together with the Mufti of Syria as well, or go to Syria. But it wasn't easy to go to Syria at the same time where we had meetings in Lebanon. And we had a Sufi imam from Saida who was very polite and not interested in politics at all, helping us getting a meeting with the Mufti in Syria. But when the answer came, what date and time we should meet up there, we had another meeting with other people in Lebanon, and so we agreed to send two persons there, but then we ended that I should go alone, taking along the showcase and talking to the Mufti in Syria, taking the bus there. Because the other member, Qasim Said, had to stay in Lebanon to help out with some very, very not so easy to talk about meetings with two groups in Lebanon called Hezbollah and Hamas. And he had some contacts in the Palestinian resistant movement that he could get through to them, and we could arrange the meeting with the top of these groups. And we knew that these groups were not easy to talk about because they are seen as a violent and terrorizing groups that we shouldn't have been meeting with. And it was also a strange thing that the meetings were put together. But when I went to Syria, he was coordinating this work and he had to stay behind. And so I went to Syria and met with Mufti Hassoun. And when he talked to me, he said, "Welcome, young man, and I can see the showcase you have here, and tell me about it." And I told him, and he said, "Listen, I will look into this case, but wisdom comes with age. I can see you're a young man, so give yourself time to get there, and you will understand things more deeply." And I never forget these words. And on the way in and out, I met a scholar with a very, very strange aura. His handshake was like electrifying on me. I never knew his name. I never got to understand it, but I never forget his face. He never spoke. He just sat on the sofa beside him in the big saloon. But he shook my hands on the way in and way out, and I felt a kind of electrifying, heartwarming understanding from him to my cause without saying even a word. And then I went back to Lebanon to learn about the good news that the Mufti in Lebanon would also arrange some demonstrations and help out with talking about the case with the Muslim politicians, and that we could also meet with some of them. The sister to Rafiq Hariri, the big president, the big prime minister in Denmark that the Sunnis loved and liked at that time and for many years. And the other special answer was that we could meet with two of these representatives of the groups, and they took us in cars, and we drove around Beirut with closed curtains in the cars and armed soldiers sitting on the front seats in the Mercedes. And we went round and round in Beirut's streets, and then we parked somewhere. We went out. We were in like a courtyard of a building, and we went into an escalator. They were only placed to one or two maximum. So we went up one by one, being monitored all the time. And then we went inside, and there we met with the next in command of Hezbollah, Naim Qasim. We thought we were going to meet Hassan Nasrallah, but he didn't show up. So Naim Qasim took the meeting with us and listened to the case, and I can't remember the details of that meeting, but he was very positive and knew that this was a case they would look into and do something about. In other words, they would like to use it politically. And that's the case with many of those we met with. Everybody wanted to see how they could use this case politically. And I was like a blind man in that time and area, that I couldn't see how everything, even the Prophet's honor and all that, could be used politically by the religious groups and people. But it took me 5, 6, 7 years to start to understand these kind of dynamics, and people can see me as a naive and not so realistic person at that time. Whatever, I believed in the idealism I wore and took on me, but I could see that the reality is more Machiavellian that I wanted to know of. Anyhow, they wanted to use the case, and later we met with Osama Hamdan, one representative of the group of Hamas, and he had the same idea and impression. And then we went out feeling that yes, the case is getting out to everyone who could put a pressure on the West, on Denmark, on the United States to get this case out to our favor, to get the meetings we wanted, to get the apologies we wanted, to get the respect for the Prophet's honor back intact. That's what we thought, and that's what we carried with us. One very strange meeting was with one old mufti called Muhammad Jozo, who had a big name in the 70s and 80s when the civil war was raging in Lebanon, and had very strong views on stuff. We went up to visit him. I didn't know anything about him, but apparently Scholar Hulaihil knew him. So we went up there, and he had some guards outside his house, a beautiful villa, and we sat there waiting for him. And he came, and immediately when he heard about the case, he said to us in a very strong fashion, "You have to immediately close this case and put it aside. Don't do anything more about it. Stop it here and now." And he mentioned incidents from France when he was studying ethics and philosophy in some university, making his PhD grade, religious PhD grade. He said that there were also someone who dared to, at that time, to try to make a negative depiction of the Prophet, and they were ignored, and things just went over, and nobody can remember it anyhow. Don't give these people what they want of the focus and attention and reaction. But we looked at each other as if this guy doesn't understand anything. You know, I'm a young man in 28, and Hlayhil was in the beginning of the 40s. Qasim Saeed was nearly that age, and the fourth member of the delegation, Mahmoud Mansour, a Palestinian, had also the same looks, even though he was a bit older. So later, in retrospective, I can see that the words of Mufti Jozo was exact and deep and correct, and how much I wished I had that wisdom and could have listened to him and have put myself out of all this. But as they say sometimes, you live through the incidents and you look back at them later. And as Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, has said very famously, life is lived forwardly but looked at backwardly. So that's why I'm telling this story, because yeah, you learn later, but sometimes it comes on too late and with a big expense that can be tragical. So we went from there happy that everyone was interacting, but we needed one more source to interact with us that hasn't interacted yet. That's the Muslim Brotherhood, or their main figures. And so, because of my special connections with the Brotherhood, I made Jihad al-Farah give me a letter of introduction to Faisal Mawlawi, one big, very known Lebanese scholar and judge, who has retired but still leading the Muslim group, as it's called in Lebanon. And I went to his small villa apartment, and he sat speaking to me in a very soft, hypnotizing voice. And I learned that he always spoke soft and easily, as if he was a man who learned how to think before and during his talk. And that's a very good quality to have in you as a leader as well. And when he listened to me and wanted to know more about my activities and so, he wasn't so happy about this cartoon case and thought that it would divert us from the main cause of explaining Islam and carrying the mission and helping the Muslim identity grow in everywhere we come, and keeping that Muslim identity as well. But I, in a way, in a very diplomatic way, tried to convince him that we had to get this through to Dr. Qaradawi, the big famous scholar who had a TV show in Qatar and is a very known scholar for supporting the ideas of the Muslim Brotherhood. And he was 10 years old when Hassan al-Banna, the leader and founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, a very charismatic man who got millions to follow him in very short times, told him that you will have a great value for the Islamic cause later. And so it was. Qaradawi became one of the big stars of the Islamic arena later on. And we wanted this case to get through to him, and we wanted the Muslim Brotherhood to interact. Mawlawi wasn't keen on that, but he wasn't rejecting the case either. He said, I would talk to Dr. Qaradawi and keep going on to the dawah. You know, like, don't get distracted. That's what he wanted most. I was happy about the breakthrough, even though it wasn't like a promising breakthrough, but it was like a kind of opening for later. So when we came back to Denmark, we had made a final action in that delegation group, and that was sending the showcase to some Saudi scholars in Saudi Arabia, despite that the embassy didn't want to interact with the case. And that had a big effect, as we will see in the next. There was a big effect of sending the showcase folder to Saudi Arabia, because in the beginning of January, a big event happened that led Saudi Arabia to interact with this, and the people in the Gulf states and Asia to interact even more with this situation. And it became a burning platform. And today I'm sorry to say that it went so far, but at that moment we could only see that we wanted to get through by any means, and we were just as stubborn as that newspaper who wanted to step on our feelings, and we wanted to show them that they weren't allowed to. But in the beginning of January, the Prime Minister had his speech, yearly speech to the people, and he mentioned that he didn't like stepping on anybody's feelings or hurt religious feelings at anyone, and everybody, especially minorities, should feel respected. This is my way of rephrasing what he said, but he kept using much of the time saying that freedom of expression was the most important one, and we can't do anything about the freedom of the press. So he repeated actually his message, and that's what made also that we looked into his message as, okay, you don't want to change your ways, and look what's awaiting you now from the Arabic and Muslim world. We have like pushed this conflict further by visiting and working alongside with these people in Egypt and the other countries. And we knew that the folder was getting Saudi Arabia, and we knew that in December the OIC and the conference had also made its statements about this cartoon crisis, and they were unacceptable. So the awareness were growing, and the stubbornness, as we saw it, of the Prime Minister and this newspaper were very soon gonna be punished by the Muslim world, who would never accept that its greatest symbol would be treated that way. But it actually got out of hand, and we didn't know how to do anything about it once the fireball was rolling down the hill. And that's how conflicts sometimes develop into wars, and wars into tragedies. On the 10th of November, on January, 10th of January, the Imam of the mosque, the biggest mosque in Mecca, called Imam al-Haramain, the two big holy mosques, Mecca and Medina, held his speech in Mecca and we were very fascinated to learn that he was talking about the cartoons and Denmark and Prophet Muhammad and the way they depicted him, and the Muslims being persecuted in Denmark, and that really arose the attention of everyone, like the media and people on the street, and people started like looking into what are these cartoons. Demonstrations started on the streets. Scholars started protesting, politicians stood in line to say something about it, newspapers wanted to cover it, and then the word boycott came up again with a bigger force. It came up once in November, but nobody did anything about it. But now it came back with a great force, and the scholars took it in, and the Council of the International Muslim Scholars took it in as a way and a mean to put pressure on Denmark and the West to stop hurting any feelings or our symbols in Islam. And they started the boycotting Danish goods and boycotting the cheese, and Denmark lost several millions on that. I'm sorry to say that it was like it was something that people just told each other to do, and it grew and it happened that way. That wasn't that wasn't part of our 11-point programs, but I can't say we were unhappy to see that, because at that time we were really frustrated and upset by what's going on in Denmark. And then followed in January several demonstrations, and also in Lebanon and Syria, and everybody was using the case basically. And then Qaradawi, he got into the case with the Muslim Brotherhood. Then you had both the Salafis, the Muslim Brotherhood, the Shiites, and the more moderate states, and the Egyptian secular state. Wow, you had everybody in the Muslim world showing that we are behind this group. These people weren't acting alone, and they were right to be mad and react, because we are all mad and reacting to these publications. We won't accept it. And in a way, it was a kind of victory, even though it was burning hell and burning flags and burning embassies. I'm sorry to say that all this happened, but I'm just explaining what happened at that time and how we felt in a very honest and open way, as I put it in my books as well. And so, in light of this big pressure that surprised both Denmark and Europe and the world, everyone started interacting and reacting to this. And also the newspaper wanted to do some things about this. And the pressure mounted actually on the Prime Minister to do something. So he went on the Arabia, the canal that's sister to the Jazeera at that time, and was a big known canal, TV canal in the Arab world. And he tried talking to the audience, but he repeated the same messages, and maybe nobody pitched him on how to explain his cultural message to an Arabic listener or viewer. And so it didn't help a lot. for him going and insisting on his ideas and thoughts, and we thought that this guy is out of way, out of his way, this prime minister, in being arrogant and keeping to one-sided idea of the case, and that this won't hold at all. And so in the end of January, the newspaper did something very strange. But before I tell about that, I have to tell about the cracks within the working group. We weren't all on agreement all the time. We had, from the beginning, Abu Laban didn't wanted the escalations, and so the media, when it started to focus on the case and talk to the members of the working group, we coordinated that there should only be one who would express himself to the media at that time, and that person should be Qasim, a spokesperson for the media. And we chose Qasim Saeed Ahmed because he's in the capital, and he spoke fluently Danish as well, with minor accent, but and followed the media, and so he did his job. But during that, it arose critics from other members of the working group that he wasn't explaining the case very good, and that he wasn't actually expressing the ideas of the working group, but maybe more the ideas of one of the group, like the scholar Abu Laban, the missionary, who didn't want to escalate. So he was like not showing our real position, and that made a criticism inside the working group. So on January 9th, we had a very special meeting in Odense, Urbekvai, and 10 or 11 members were present there. I mentioned them in my book, Representatives, and they agreed on putting Qasim out of the role of spokesperson and wanted somebody else. And then Raid, the scholar Halayhel, suggested me, and I said, no, I'm sorry, I have my wife, I have my work, and I'm doing a lot of work beside that for the group. I cannot take more on. But what about Abdul Wahid Peterson? They didn't like it because he was not in coherence with Abu Laban at that time. Abdul Wahid Peterson was a Danish Muslim who converted in the 70s, 80s to like a Sufi-like way, and had his own activities and way and of doing things, and that didn't always fell good with the other groups, and something many turns the blind eye to when they come into the religious groups, whether it's Christians, Jews, or Muslims or others, that the big differences inside these groups sometimes takes away the glory and the beauty of the missionary presentations of one holy unit and all that. A lot of diversions and distinctions and isolations and all that. So it's not easy to get along. So I suggested Abdul Hamid Sørensen, a young man I knew who also converted because of marrying a Pakistani woman, and I became friend with him, and he grew more and more into the faith, but he couldn't speak Arabic, so they rejected him. He was studying at the university, was a good choice. Then I said, what about Asma Abdul Hamid? They rejected her as well, even though she was a very good choice. She spoke Danish, she knew the society, and she was young and could do a good impression. They said, she's a woman, how could she get in and out our group so easily? It's not easy for her to do that. No, you should take on the case. I said, no, but what about Kamran Shah, the guy from the Islamic culture, from Islamic Center, studying, and Abu Laban said this is a good choice, and people accepted the idea, but they said he was on travel for the moment, so if you can take on the position until he comes back, it will be fine. I said, okay, only temporarily I can do that, and with one condition. Beside that, it's temporarily, and nobody is to speak with the media without my consent or coordinating with me first, because we need to have only one voice on the outside and not many voices, as they usually try to find the cracks in the way we speak and say that we are sliced-tongued and we speak with two voices and two tongues, and we are not clear or we are not honest in our expressions. That has been a usual trend when they speak to us, and as the Islam scholar Tim Jensen, a Danish non-Muslim, said once to the media, explaining why they could catch the missionary Abu Laban or somebody else saying once and one thing and other thing. He said that's because it's more than one identity they carry. They carry the identity of the religious scholarism, and they carry the identity of the realism or something like that. And that's what the media doesn't explain or show, or maybe they unintentionally focus negatively on that. But history will show all that later. But then it's too late. We are all at that time buried and dead, and they will say there was something totally wrong with the way media in the 20s, in the second half of the 20th century and the start of the 21st century was using their role to provide speeches and freedom of speeches to people, even though it's a very important role and very, very crucial role for the world, for the people, for democracy, for freedoms, for everything. But using it in a way that makes people more stupid and not understanding is not a way that would promote understanding between societies and people and communities. Anyhow, they chose me as a spokesperson, and the next day I went on TV. They thought it was Qasim Said. He gave me his list of program, and I presented myself, Ahmed Akari. I thought maybe I was a kind of James Bond, but without all the gadgets. And I was, in a way, thrilled and enthusiastic about doing my part, but I really didn't want the part. I took it because of, once more, of the duty they gave to me. And everything was going to like burn in a big fireball at that moment, and all the focus would come on me, on my face, as if I was the solemn provider and leader and coordinator of everything around the case. And the Danish would come to hate a lot of what they thought I did and the things they think I was doing or wanted to do to Denmark. And that's the problem. Many of the details go out, and many of the other actors who had the responsibility fades out, and you have this witch on the stake. You just burn her and everything is fine. And that's what some of my Danish friends told me later. You became the witch on the stake, and we have to burn a witch. There must be clarifying of the sin. There must be an offering, and you became that sacrifice in a big way. And even my own group let me down, and that was what hurt me a lot later. I will come back to that later. But at that moment, in the beginning of January, I was the spokesperson, and the things got more and more out of hand. And I tried to reach out as one of the first thing I did, to reach out to Carsten Juste, the leader of the chief editor of the newspaper. And so I wrote an email. I didn't expect him to respond to it. I said, Carsten, the world is being more and more on edge, and we have the means to solve this. Shouldn't we meet and try to find a solution? And an email clicked in. I was surprised. I was sitting in the offices beside Bulaban's office there outside, and Qasim Said was close to me. I called him and said, look, Carsten Juste actually wants to meet. I called the scholar who's leading the working group, Helaihel, in Ors. He said, I don't want to meet him. I don't want to meet this guy who's saying this about the prophets, but you guys can go. And Abu Laban said he would like to join. That was a very normal choice. And then I told them I would like to take Abdul Wahid Peterson with us. And so I went and explained the situation for him and convinced him to go along. He was happy to come and to talk to Carsten Juste. So we went all three to visit him in Jolpi Borgen, in the castle of JP in the middle of Copenhagen. When we came inside, we were waiting a bit, and then somebody took us up to, I think, the first or second floor, and there was another editor who was present at the meeting, and he came and shook our hands and said, welcome to the most hated newspaper for you guys, or something like that. And we sat, and he started talking about his view. He said that we are a liberal newspaper, and it's our duty historically to support the suppressed opinions and ideas, and we can't have somebody afraid of expressing themselves in a democracy against people with power. And that's why it's our historic and present duty to stand up to the suppressed and to the people's voice, and to in any means fight against suppression. And looking at it historically, I'm a teacher of science, of social sciences. I could understand what he was saying, and I knew the relevance of what he was saying, because it was factually what has been in history. The Jyllands-Posten started as a liberal newspaper opposing the one-sided views that the kingdom at that time wanted, like through politics, to bring out to people. And they wanted that more free and more out of the hands of special voices. But as Abdul Wahid Peterson commented, I didn't comment in the beginning. He said to him, "This is not a suppressor you are suppressing. This is a small minority you are stepping on, and you are using this." In a wrong manner, in a wrong fashion. And Abu Laban was the first to speak, and after him, after Cast and told him that this is new for us all, and we are minorities who came from wars and poverty um, and troubles in our countries, and people haven't settled down yet truly. And there are some cultural misunderstandings through the way, and there are some practices that may be weird or wrong for a developed society. But you have to understand that we are like groups of minorities with not such kind of powers, and we are here to find safety and haven from suppression and oppression and followings. And so Abu Laban put forward his idea that he had mentioned before to the media, that instead of just an apology in words, the newspaper should cover 3-4 seminars about the life of Prophet Muhammad that we could explain or put the material ready for in the 4 or 5 biggest universities in Denmark, having the media attention from the Jyllands-Posten covering the meetings, covering the seminars about Prophet's life. And the Cast News said, "Yeah, well, I will think about that." But he said, "I feel very strange that a man who died for 1500 years should put so many people's feelings on fire so long time after." And I never forget these words. It's like he was really truly surprised, living in his own bubble or another world, or he's moved so far away from the religious thoughts or ideas or their impact and importance in people's life in the East and Middle East, that he didn't understand why this character who died 1400 years ago, whom he doesn't look up to in any way, could have such an effect on people's feeling living so long after, dealing with all their own troubles and all that. And that's exactly why religion is so strong. And in some people's views, it's like an opium for the people, and in other people's views, it's like an empowerment for the people. And in religion in itself, it sees itself as the way to both salvation and the life that promises a kind of paradise because of the suffering in this life. And so the prophets of religion they are like the ones, the guides who show the road, and like Moses is for the Jews, and Jesus is a God for the Christians. Muhammad is the glorified leader and the prophet and the way road rider for the Muslims. He didn't understand the depths of that, and that's why that dialogue, if it had happened back in October, it maybe could have turned the events in a total other direction. Anyhow, he said, "If it helps, I can apologize to you 3 here for hurting the feelings of the Muslims." And at that point, I felt like annoyed, because I got in and said to him, "I understand what you've been explaining on freedom of speech and your position, but it's not enough to apologize to us. This case is so public. We have to do it in public in order to put the balance in order." He couldn't do that, but he said that he will think about the suggestions, and we went out of the meeting. While Abu Laban saw that this was a good opening, a good start, and we should trap down our activities of escalating. I'm talking now in end of January, where the Muslim world already is totally hot, and 4 days from that, Qaradawi, the big scholar, would announce the day of anger, and everything will go into a hellish situation with burning embassies and all that. And so the newspaper on the 30th of January, I was on my way from Odense, from a speech on the television there, and in the train back to the capital, I got a call from Qasim Saeed. He said, "Congratulations, the newspaper has just apologized." And I couldn't believe my ears. And he said, yes, it's on their website. And he I said to him, print the papers and save it. He said, I have already printed it. And I was relaxed. It's like my muscles and my inner feelings just all relaxed. And I thank God. I said, yes, we're out of this, and this is the end of it. I was so relaxed at that moment. And I called several others to congratulate them, and they called me. And then Qasim Said got back to me later that evening and said, no, they have withdrawn their apology, and now there is another article online, same evening. And I have these two articles. I showed them in the detailed explanations in some of my other videos. That 8:30 in the evening, PM, they had this article. They're wanting to apologize for hurting the Muslims' feelings. And it was updated on 21:31, saying that we don't apologize, and the Muslim citizens has to understand that we defend the freedom of speech. So they totally turned around on that matter in a matter of hours. And I still have both of the copies from their website. And so we had a dilemma here, what to do. They had apologized, and one Saudi newspaper had already grasped the news that night, and the next day had already published, Denmark has apologized, like stop the anger, stop the boycott, stop everything. And the same with Egyptian media, and the cultural editor Fleming Rose went on Al Jazeera and said like the same message in a way, or told them that we have apologized for hurting the feeling of people and all that. And so the case is closed, it's over in a way. But inside the working group, it was a different manner. I was torn between two views. I had Abu Laban on one side telling me that every time I should speak to the press, I should just say that we accepted the apology. That was the reasonable thing to do. And I had on the phone from Aarhus, Scholar Leihel saying, no, we cannot do that until we have verified that if it was true or not. And so I called them together. I told them, you two have to meet and talk. And they met and talked, and the day after, and I said, you have to figure this out, because I'm torn between two directions, and I can only speak with one voice and one tongue. And so they met, but nothing came out of the meeting. They were very diplomatic to each other, and actually, in a way, didn't even discuss the matter in depth. And so I said, listen, I cannot continue like this. We have to call in the working group as fast as possible. And so we called them in a meeting in Odense. In the very beginning of February. I told them we have two main ideas here. The newspaper had apologized and withdrawn the apology. So we can go in one direction, saying we accept this apology and use it as a way of saying we won this case, and we get on with the seminars and other things, and we relax because we've used already so much power and energy, and we've been pushed to the limit, and the Muslim world is pushed to the limit towards this case, and this should stop now. And the other idea is that the apology is fake and we cannot accept it, and we will lose everything we've built up to until now by accepting this apology, and we should keep going and keep fighting and keep showing the Muslim world that we will not be treated as with this cheat apology, and they continue their war on us. And I said that I would like the members of the working group, representatives for everyone, to write their choices on a paper. It's like a secret bullet voting. And so they did. Everyone wrote their voting. And it came out like 8-1. Everyone, including myself, we wanted to go with accepting the apology and get out of the crisis with a kind of victory, showing that it was okay, we got there. Except the leader of the group, Leihel, he said no, and he said, I knew I would be isolated in this manner, and that's why I must tell you all that we cannot decide on our own here. We are only representatives for the organizations, 27 organizations, and have to be in the meeting because this such a crucial case cannot be decided by us here. And that awoke some of my negative feelings. And I said to him in that meeting directly, I said, I respect you. I have followed your instructions for a long time, and I supported you in all what's been going on in this case. But what you are doing now is not ethically correct. You came to this meeting and we took a decision, and now because it didn't fall in your hat as a decision you liked, now you want to turn the table around, because I know exactly what you want to do if you call in all the organizations. You want to manipulate their meaning and opinion ahead. You will talk to those you know, and you will convince them of your views, and then when we come in the big meeting, people will have another idea of the case than they have now. And the other guy, Abu Malik, the Algerian, he was surprised, said, no, you cannot say that to the scholar, he's like this and that. I said, no, I will tell you, wait and see, that would be exactly what's going to happen. And Abu Laban was so thrilled with my way of confronting Halayhil in my own way, that he came with a cup and poured some juice up to me with a full respects to my position at that time. So he saw that he got some support from a side he didn't expect, because until that time I've been mostly siding with that we should get through with this case and show the newspaper and everybody involved that we are right in our case. But at that moment I could see that this is more politics than it was a religion, and it was more stubbornness, and that the one man's voice and decision should be should be overruling 8 other men's decisions on that matter, and that couldn't go with my ideas at all. And so happened, it did. 2 days later, the big group of organizations came once more and met. And before the meeting even started, my old teacher, whom I know very well, is very easy to get his feelings aroused, had already been manipulated by Halayhil's views, and he stamped on the table very hard and said, this is unacceptable, this is a cheat, how can we accept this apology, and this cannot go. And some others supported his voice, and then suddenly we could see the group following Halayhil's opinion. And that made Qasim Said very angry. I remember he left the meeting and went out to get some fresh air, and I followed him a little bit, and he was shaking his head. Abu Laban tried to argue against but couldn't get through, and the Turks, when they saw this, Ahmed Dennis told me, we are out, forget everything about us, we are out. He didn't like the way this was heading, and typically the Arabs couldn't agree, and the Muslims were in a big conference like that reminded me of the movie Lawrence of Arabia, where they have this council meeting in the Arab tribes, and they couldn't agree, shouting at each other, talking in each direction, and that was like a similar picture in a way, even though they didn't shout at the same level at those, but the same idea goes. And so they told me that as a spokesperson, I had to follow the instructions of the group and say that the apology wasn't accepted, and they have to stick to it to be correct. So I called in a press meeting. I sat with Abu Laban, and I sat with Khalid Samha and one more guy, and we the media was there really in big numbers. It was the most important press conference I ever attended or was a spokesperson at. And we were in the library at Dortia Vine, northwest Copenhagen, the Islamic fund there. And this guy from Reuters was there too, and that's why he contacted me later to speak to me in the case. He told me I was there in the background listening to you at that day. And I had to explain the background for the story, and that the newspaper tried to apologize but didn't. The Muslim world is on fire, and we have to do something about this. So I urged the newspaper to stick to its apology so we can accept it and we can get on. And everybody thought that I was speaking very diplomatically, but I could feel that this was a tragedy we were heading into. And I had to say, as the group wanted me to, that the group couldn't accept this apology. Despite that, the news in the Muslim world had already spread that the apology was accepted, and that everyone was turning the fire down. It's okay, it's over. Denmark has understood the situation. And Hillel tried to oppose it as much as he can and got the message out that no, this wasn't over yet, but he couldn't get through in the same manner as he thought he would. And that was the end of the working group, because after that Abu Laban came out and spoke freely as he wanted again, and the others didn't stick to the group. They went on their own, and the Muslim Brotherhood withdrew. And the Arabic Cultural Center, who had followed us all the way, they are actually in secret Hamas supporters from Palestinians from Lebanon, and I know them very well. Some of them were my friends, and one of them came out to the media and spoke very falsely, saying that we have never been in that group and never supported it. It was their leader, the scholar, and the one who attended some of these meetings or sent a representative. I was so shocked how they ran and hid, all of them, so suddenly and so quickly. And then we saw the faces of Barazi and the guy from the Islamic community of the Brotherhood and the Islamic Cultural Center Imam. They went and spoke to the media and said, yes, now it's finished. Now we are talking with Denmark again. And they took like the credit for everything that the working group has been doing for months, and they haven't even been participating. And I thought, my God, where are the ethics? Where are the values of these people? Everything we've been preaching and talking to people about in this religion, and this and about the truth, about being humble, about agreement, about brotherhood. The cracks started coming later, not at that time. I was so convinced of everything that there were no cracks, but the 5 years that followed made me realize more and more that there was things that didn't add up. I could talk about it maybe in some later recordings. But at that moment, things like started fading out. The Muslim world got down again from its fiery, hellish reaction, and everybody used the crisis in the way they wanted. The Egyptian used it to show they were the guardians of the religion. The Saudians showed it to show that they took up the cases that mattered most to the Muslims, and the Pakistanis used it to oppose Mahdi Musharraf Muzaffar, the general that was leading their country at that time, and so on and so on and so on. And yeah, I tried to go back to my school and try to talk to the media at that time. I forgot to say that at that time, in those days, in February, after the day of anger, many media came to Denmark. I have the cards of like over 100. I spoke to 40 sometimes in a few days. From Japan, from Australia, New Zealand, Canada, everywhere, Russia, everybody was standing in line to talk to me about, as a spokesperson, about this case. And I had very long and hard days. And the guy from Danish television one came with a suggestion at that moment, said, can I follow you with a hidden camera? Like I have a handheld camera, I can follow you from morning to evening. I said, yes, but you can't get close to my house or show where it is, because it can be dangerous for my family. But as soon as I wake up and get out, you're welcome to follow me all day long. I am at any rate out almost all day following the news and talking, walking and all that. And he did, and a good documentary came out of it. To my surprise, it was more touching that one should think, and he showed that the other face of me and the case, and how much I stood alone with all this in the end, and everybody like went back to their holes, and how things like cracked up, and he didn't know the half of it at that time, this guy. And the documentary, I know, has been shown in Danish schools and different media, and it was touching actually. Also, people told me that. Finally, I have to speak about the conference in Bahrain. Now, everything up to now was the case itself, the actions, the reactions, but in the end, it all faded down after that fake apology, and the people splitting up, and the Muslim world like accepting the fake apology, going along with it, and working on relations again. And many missionaries from Denmark and Islamic Christian dialogue centers and Islamic cultural dialogue centers started working also on rebuilding relations slowly with Denmark, Danish community. USA interfered, the United Nations interfered, and so things were going in another direction. And In Denmark, I stood like as the face of the crisis, as the guy who did it all, as the person who was the madman and the crazy guy. And I remember once I was going to City West in Aarhus, and a woman came out from there, and she said, "There goes the devil," she said to her daughter. I was very shocked. That's a total different picture of me and how they look at me. So I knew I was branded as the evil guy and the one everybody saw on television so much for those 2 months where everything burned, and both explaining and holding on to the case. And I remember in the end of January, 26th of January, there was a very good television meeting sent live on the Danish television from Thorvaldsen's museum in near the parliament. And we had the editor, chief editor there. We had Pia Kasko, the right-wing politician. We had Nasser Kader, and in the talk, we had the Islam expert Jørgen Bæk Simonsen, and I was there, and the former foreign minister Lykketoft. And everybody told me after that, many told me that you expressed very well and you were very well spoken. And I had a suggestion to Carsten Juste at that point, live. I didn't tell him before, but somehow he got the message that I had a suggestion for him, because when we met, before we went live, he told me, "I already know what you're going to suggest me on TV. And you are a cunning little politician," he said. I said, "This is not politics. The world is on edge, and we have to stop this. And the way to do it is that you give the apology." And so on television, I told him that I would like you, if you give an apology now, I can accept it. We can accept it in the work group, and we can work together on settling things down in the Muslim world. And he couldn't. He talked himself out of it, and he said, "I cannot give this apology. I don't like hurting anybody's feeling, but I am standing firm on my position." And later, both Jørgen Bæk Simonsen and Lykketoft came and gave me a thumbs up or a clap on the shoulder, said you did very well, as an expression of the Islamic faith. So at that point, I was like on the height of the ratings, also among the Muslim community. When there was made a poll, I came out on the top 2 people trusted and liked to express on their behalf, with me and Abu Laban was the second. So it was a good way to show that we can also speak in a very reasonable and understandable way. We're just not some angry guys with beards who run around and just want to hit the opponents. But all that was distorted, as I said later, with an incident that happened before we went to Al-Bahrain, but I will talk to it when I talk about Al-Bahrain. So what happened in that conference in Bahrain? It would be the end of the story of the cartoons, and after that it will like be a walk in, it will fade out. So a month later in March, we got an invitation to go to Bahrain, the kingdom in the Gulf that was very rich and very small and had its own trouble with both Sunnis and Muslims and other groups, and it's all settled down, and they had to hold a conference there with 300 big names of scholars and professors and knowledgeable people in communication and what you call it, different issues on politics and society. And we were invited as well. So we got the message that you should send a delegation to the conference. So Abu Laban was chosen, and Hlayhel, and Abu Bashar, Qasim, what is called Muhammad Samha, the guy who went on the delegation to Egypt, and they said you should go along. I was happy to go along, and I wanted to go along. This was my only like oasis in all that I've been through for the last 2 months, and they told us that we should bring along a Danish converted, so we could also show that Denmark had Muslims that could express and show the face of Denmark in another way. And again, I went back to Abdul Wahid Peterson, who was more than happy to participate, even though he hadn't participated in the actions at all. But we took him along and said it's okay. And they told us that the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, the Islamic group in Denmark, would meet us there, and that's because partly it was arranged by big forces in contact and in reach with the Brotherhood from Qatar. So they wanted a representative from the Brotherhood, and they wanted some of the other faces. And when we arrived, immediately after we arrived, we were taken up to the some in the big two big hotels were what can you call, were reserved to that case, and we went up to the arrangers, and one of them told us very clearly, you have to follow us on these 2 days, and we want to show that you guys have been doing a good work to build the relations, and we want you to get out from here with the message, and we will support you on that you have been here to build bridges with and for Denmark, and not like stirring things up. And this was part of the truth, and not the whole truth, but part of the truth, that we weren't wanting to stir things up, but at the same time we did stir things up because they didn't listen to us. But anyhow, that was the intention of the conference. As part of it, another intention was to come out with a working group that could be called the International Group for Supporting the Prophet's Name in the world. And they wanted to work on legal matters, on communicative matters, on missionary matters, on showing the face of Islam and the Prophet in a wider and more strong way, and not sticking to reactions to drawings or to caricatures or something else, but to work actively on presenting Islam and helping with the Muslim community to raise their identity. And so when the conference came to an end, it was a beautiful 2-3 days, food and drinks, and I met some of the biggest scholars there I've always looked up to and listened to on cassettes and MP3s, and always wanted to meet Salman al-Oda, who was a big star in my sphere at that time, and Aid al-Qarni and Yusuf Qaradawi, not the least. And then I met also Faisal Mawlawi, the guy from Lebanon, the judge who told me not to divert from the mission, and he had a very good contact to Qaradawi and the Brotherhood, and he was sitting in near a palm on a sofa in the aula in the hotel, and I went there, kissed his hand, and thanked him for his actions, and said, "Are you happy and satisfied now? You see what this came to?" And he wasn't really, he was angry and upset with me in his own way, his own soft and nice way. But I could see he wasn't truly happy about that we went on with the case to build it that way. I smiled and thanked him for his support and help, and kissed his hand again and his head, and said to him, I hope the best will come out of it. And but I was also, my delusions started to grow also at that conference, because I saw luxury. I saw some of these preachers working out and doing stuff, like acting like if they were very material superstars, like film stars and so on. And maybe even film stars would have been more humble, like trying not to show themselves. And the food and the drink and everything that were brought, nobody opposed, nobody said anything. And the Muslim world is starving and people having troubles. And these guys, the stars of the Muslim world, are on TVs every day telling people to be patient and to trust in God and to help each other. And they were sitting here. I didn't like the face of it. And I wanted them to be in more humble residence and say we would not meet in these hotels, and we don't want all this money spent on us here. Let's spend it on some charity work to help the poor of the world, and let's meet in a more humble circumstances. I didn't hear or see or feel any of that being present. They were totally sucked into that modern media star money and all that stuff. And to my view, it wasn't interacting well. But I took it with me, and it was some of these points I later tried to think about more in depth. But at that time, I was happy meeting them and being with them, and we had this conference. And in the end, at the last day of the conference, someone came and tapped my shoulder. I can't remember if it was a servant or some guy from the Gulf who was attending the conference or helping out with it. And he said to me, the there is some media out there who wants to meet you. They're waiting for you. They said we should call you out. And I was sitting beside Hilayha listening to Yusuf Qaradawi's final words in the conference. And I went out and they faced me with a shock. They turned on the cameras and they said, "What do you say what do you say to your defense, or what's your opinion on you threatening the member of parliament, Nasser Kader?" I was totally shocked. I think everybody could see it in my face and eyes if you could find that clip. And everyone who knows the science of face expression and hiding lies and all that would easily detect I was in total surprise. I was swept out off my feet. I couldn't recall at any moment saying anything bad about him or expressing any threats against him. Not because I liked him and not because I'm against him having a hard time, but it's because I just don't do that. It's not my way of being, and it's not my identity. I said there must be a mistake. And they showed me a video where I could see myself in a car with a hidden camera turned on me, and I was saying that if this guy would become a minister, that he would get hard time with the gangs because nobody even likes him. And they interpreted some of my words in that way as a threat, that it was as if it was translated into Danish as if I was saying that that we will let the gangs hurt him or do something to him. I wasn't saying that at all. And the police looked into the matter also and told me later that sent me a letter saying there is no wrongdoing in what you said. We could see it was brought out of context and it was a wrong interpretation from Arabic into Danish. And well, it was too late for that because the media had already put it on the front pages and everyone was talking about nothing else. At the same day as the conference in Bahrain was going to show our case and talk about it, we wanted to take it back with us to Denmark to show our understanding and bridge building. Wow, it all fell down, and again on me as the person who is under total focus. And what was that story? That was a story from back in February where the world was on fire and all that. Happened in a very rough time. An Egyptian media came to Denmark to ask us to talk about our views without interruptions. Like when the 60 minutes came, they gave only Abu Laban 5, 7, 8 minutes and he expressed himself, and other media gave us some place, but here we could have an hour or so to talk about all the dimensions about this crisis and our ideas and thoughts and actions. And we liked that idea, and we hired the studio, Abu Laban and Hilayha and I and one more, to go down and talk about the case. And on our way, we meet this guy who says he's an Algerian called Mohammed Sifawi from French television Tree. He had two guys with him with cameras and all that. And he was talking to Abu Laban, said to him, "Can I follow you? Because I would like to make interviews with you. It's very interesting." And Abu Laban said to him, "Yeah, you can tag along. Come along with the cars." And that was his way of being open to everyone and even the enemies. Just get along, have nothing to hide in a kind of matter that's what he wanted to show him. Hilayha was a little more critical and didn't like him, and he tried telling me, but I didn't understand anything. So when we sat in the car, and the guy started asking Abu Laban on the way to the center, would you think that people would die for the face? He said, "Yes, I know many people who would." He answered him like that. "I know many people who love their face so much that they're ready to die for it. That's very natural in a way in Abu Laban's mind and view." And the guy recorded that on hidden TV, also brought it out as if this guy knows many people who is ready to fight or something. And then he asked, "You think that the politician Nasser Kader would become a minister?" they say. And here I broke out in a small laughter. I think it was just impulsive. I'm an impulsive guy. And I said, "I don't think so, because he's not well liked in many environments. The gangs would be after him," or something like that. And I said it in a fashion that could be interpreted in a strong way, but it was never to be interpreted. It couldn't be interpreted as if it was a threat. But that's exactly what they did. In the text, in Danish, it made to look like it was saying I was threatening him that if he becomes a minister, this and this will happen. But that wasn't at all the case, which was confirmed by police later. But what does that help? And that was back in February. And so he hid that recordings and adjusted it and made it ready, but never showed it on television. Nobody showed it on Danish television. Nobody confronted me about it before that exact day in Bahrain. And what a coincidence that was. I was confronted with that page and with that case. I was shocked and I tried to answer for myself, but it was too late. Everybody was seeing that clip online, on TV, on television, and the text, and everybody saying this guy is threatening the parliament member and so on, so on. And the parliament member went to therapy and went home and lay in bed for several days, sick and ill, couldn't go to work, and everything was really just mounting up to me, the little guy, with no means at all and nobody to cast out in the world. Even if I wanted to, I had no one. I was just me, a small idealistic teacher, missionary who likes God and the Word of God, and was thrown into this case. And then I was made to be like the biggest boss of everyone in the country. And I was shocked, and it was a burning to my face, a stigma to my life, and it hurt me a lot. And after the conference in Bahrain, I was very, very hurt. I couldn't stay in Denmark, so I tried go living in Lebanon and staying with my wife and daughter there. At that time, I was studying my second study after finishing my Bachelor of Education in the University of Aarhus in Denmark, taking a degree in pedagogy with my friend, my good Danish friend. And we got the state's support. It was a few thousand krona we got between our hands each month, 3,000 to 4,000 maximum, and that's what I had to live for in my home country. I got some support from my parents a bit, and we tried to manage, but basically I was left to my own. And then later I discovered that Hlayhel, the leader of he left the country. They didn't renew his resident permit. And he went back to Lebanon with a lot of help. Many brothers and people, I know that from several of them, they agreed to pull in some money to give him monthly so he could stand on his feet, because he's had a family and a small kid. Nobody turned to say the same to me, but Abu Laban said we have to compensate those who were hurt, and especially our brother Akari. And I never heard or saw anything beyond that later, and I didn't ask. I was so proud, and I said I would try to manage on my own, but nobody turned back to me on that. And I was thrown out of my position as a school teacher without any compensation, and in a manner that actually the union told me you could get some money out of a case if you would raise a case against them, because the way they fired you was not legal in Denmark. You cannot fire people for their political opinion or participation in political activities. You have to have another reason. And I didn't want to do that because in my eyes it was a Muslim school for Muslim kids, and God knows about all this. I know deeply in my heart that I didn't want to hurt anyone, even though they hurt me. And so my teacher Nasser Qasimi, he contacted the leader of the Islamic Cultural Center, who was the foreman of the behind the school, as you can say, and behind the money. And he was a supporter of the Prophet and went on organized meetings and supported us all the way. And he said, you've thrown this guy out. He has no means of income. At least give him some kind of compensation for some months. And I got 3 months compensation. After that, I was on my own. And I started trying to pitch myself as a translator of religious books, of the Quran, of something, and I asked these fellow scholars to help me get through to somebody in the Gulf, but nothing happened. And so I came more and more to be on my own. I was forced back to Denmark amidst a burnt face, the witch, the evil guy, he's back here. And who wants to hire me? Who wants to talk to me at all? People thought of me as the evil guy. And that's how it is. How it was. And so finally in the end of July summer 2008, I don't know, by a miracle, by angels' help, by something, I found a position in Greenland and they accepted me. Even though I sent it with my name and CV and everything, they weren't totally aware of my identity, they said, or that they didn't care about it. And so I went to Greenland, and that's another story because they kept following me there, the right wing in Denmark, and was trying to get me out of my position even in Greenland. But the Greenlanders, they stood fast and they said, we know the Danish racism, we don't like it, and we will protect you and support you here. You can just stay in the school. You are a nice guy, you joke with us, and the kids like you, and we have nothing, no finger to put upon you, even though we want to throw you out. And I stayed there for several years and became a new chapter in my life. But I was totally let down by my background. And so told me the wife of one of my close friends. She said, your group had let you down for these years. And my wife, at that time, she told me, she said, they sold you for two pieces of sweets or something like that. It's a saying in Lebanon. And say they sold you for two pennies. And so they did. So they did. So that's me, that's the story from the beginning, as I saw it, as I lived it, with some comments that were personally from my side, but basically facts as they were put in the book and they were confirmed by journalists. And what to learn from this? A lot to be learned on personal level, on a society level, and the political level. And I hope the world has learned from it, but as we can see, the fight and conflicts are still ongoing. But maybe it's also bringing more understanding together between the Gulf, the West, and the Gulf, and the East, and the Middle East in general, to understand how to act. And I'm sure Denmark had learned a lot from it, and how to also take the talks, even with people they don't like. And I think the right liberal wing also got a lot of criticism later for the way they handled things, and they learned from it as well. But everybody got his work, like the Imam Halayhel got the work in Lebanon, in a community that hired him. Abu Laban got, I know, support from the Gulf to keep his place running, and the others went back mostly to their jobs or got another job. But I couldn't go anywhere or nowhere, and I kept out of the loop. And before I went to Greenland, I took off my Imam clothes. I was I was preaching from three mosques in Denmark, from Odense, Aarhus, and the same speak, Odense, Aarhus, and Copenhagen. And I said mostly the same things, that from now on I don't want to be an imam. I don't like the divisions among us. I don't like the way things are, and people should not refer to me as someone to look up to or learn from. I'm walking on my own way and my own direction from now on. That was back in 2008, 5 or 6 years before I even thought of publishing any books or any stories. And maybe I can talk about that in another recording sometime later. I hope for peace, and ask everyone I did wrong to for forgiveness, and hope to find consolation both in Denmark with my Muslim Arabic background. And what can I say? If you do wrong, you must at least be brave to admit it and to try to turn around or fix it. That's what I've been trying, but for 10 years, still the same isolated guy, and